how to properly prune a U-shaped espalier apple tree, the famous three-bud pruning. But before we start pruning our espalier apple tree, let's first take a look at the U, the double U. So we end up with axes that we need to keep. Keep in mind that we maintain about 30 centimeters per year. If it goes beyond 30 centimeters, we cut it anyway. So the first thing is to check the branches that we are going to keep, the main branches. So we keep the most beautiful ones. For that, we will already tie them to our framework. Here, this is an open framework, as it is meant to separate a vegetable garden. If it were along the wall, we would do exactly the same thing. So there is this axis that we are going to keep. We are going to remove the side branches. That's it. This one isn't viable either since it grows inward, and this one too. We are going to cut it back to 3 buds. I read my main branch, always so that it stays on track. So be careful when using ties not to tighten them too much so that you never strangle him. It's always good to check that the tie isn't digging into the wood. So here we have 3 nice branches, so we need to remove 2 of them. There's one that is positioned well, right in line, so we keep it. I'm cutting the other 2. Here is our axis. So here is still our axis. This branch here is important. The one on the side, I'm cutting it. So here I can cut it back to 3 buds to have a future shoot. This one, we have a bud on the side. I'm going to count the 3 buds. 1, 2, 3. I'm cutting above a flower bud. Here I have my axis. I'm cutting the branches that are on the side. And here is our tree already, positioned with its 3 shoots. Know that it will take about 3 to 4 years for it to reach a height of 2.20 meters. Positioned with its 3 shoots, know that it will take about 3 to 4 years for it to reach a height of 2.20 meters. Second rule to follow. Observe the base of your apple tree. Between the collar, the graft bulge, and the first shape, the first U. There must absolutely be no branches in this part. Here, that's not the case. But if there were a branch growing here, I would cut it. If you observe this twig, a twig that has a flower, so a flower bud, a flower, fruits that will bend this twig under their weight, the fruits will drag on the ground. So it's useless to keep it. I'm cutting it. We can even cut a little lower, because the problem will come back next year. We are in the lower part. Here, we have a twig that is growing more towards the inside. Our cut has 3 buds. I'm counting 1, 2, 3 buds. I'm cutting. I won't have any flowers this year. Next year, I will have my first cluster and my first fruiting. The purpose of the 3 bud cut is to bring the future flowers and fruits as close as possible to the main framework. Here, we have a twig that measures about 30 centimeters in height. Even if there were fruiting too far from the main stem of the framework, one of the frameworks, we cut it. We're lucky because at the base, there's the start of a flower bud, the beginning of a cluster, so we can cut it. In this part, we have a flower bud 10 centimeters from our framework. This bud is alone, so we leave it. There's no pruning to be done. Since the fruiting will happen in this area, quite close to our main branch. In principle, we keep the clusters every 15 centimeters. Here is a twig that measures 20 centimeters long. At the tip of this twig, there's a bud, a flower, and slightly lower down, we can see that there's a cut, a pruning that took place last July. This is the famous green pruning. I'm going to keep this flower since there will be fruits that under their weight will bend this branch. And next year I will have a bloom. Closer to the main branch, at that moment, I could cut much shorter. Here's another example of a branch that was pruned in green last July. So you can clearly see the twig with the flower at the end, but since it's crossing and will meet the other part of the U, it's better to cut it. So we're going to recalculate our 3 buds. So there's a bud that's behind. You can't see it, but it's right behind. A second bud, and the third one is located in this part. I cut at an angle, and that allows me to reduce it. I'm shortening it so that I have a future bloom even closer to my main branch. The pruning is now finished, or almost. We just need to remove a few twigs. So, a general rule is never prune